Actually, we do share something similar. We share one history. It's being excluded from immigration because started with Chinese Inclusion Act.
Yeah.
And then it was expanded to Japanese and then
That's
expanded
true.
to all Asian. But we shouldn't define ourselves using that, right? It's a very sad history. And I think we can sometimes sit together and talk about it. But I don't think it's a strong justification to make it something just so real, because it's always human brain loves category. When no matter how we divide people, after you make divide, you will find it makes sense. Like you can divide Chinese into other ways, like Cantonese speaking Chinese, Mandarin speaking Chinese, and people will say, yeah, it makes so much sense. So I just feel a lot of times how we divide people, or should we do it at all? That is really something we need to talk more, but there is not enough conversation about it.
That's a great point. That's a great point, because it's making me think, we don't really talk about it in the context of Asian Americans or Asians in general. We know a lot about it in, the history of slavery and that group becoming some meaningful designation, and people who have that shared history of, ancestry of slaves and turning that into a community based on that ancestry. But we don't really hear about it very much in terms of Asian American. That's a really interesting thing that it's weird that I've never even considered it that way. And it is strange to group yourselves based on this historical, oppression. But the other thing you said about, the human brain loves categories. We do, and we can't help it, right? But it's interesting how far we can subdivide, right? So just thinking of, you're British, but you're not just British, you're English, but you're not just English, you're a Londoner, but you're not just a Londoner, you are from this specific little neighborhood that has its own accent. And people can tell just from hearing you speak where exactly you're from in London. And probably there's even more subdivisions within that, like, oh, you're from this block versus the other block. And I can see, so my question is, I can see how sometimes it makes sense to designate myself, for example, as someone who lives in New York, or even further, someone who lives in Queens, right? Or then go up further and say, someone who lives in America, and then someone who is a child of immigrants. Like, all these categories are in some way accurate, and they may give some detail about who I am, depending on the level. But then there's also all these other ways in which it erases who I actually am and the assumptions you mentioned. But can you see any utility in doing this? You mentioned you're proud of being Chinese, but that it doesn't really encapsulate who you are. Does it? What meaning does it provide for us to know that you're Chinese?
So, Daisy, do you want to answer this question?
I feel like when I bring up like the topic that I'm Chinese, like what I'm actually want people to like know is just, I hope they could like sit down and really talk to me. Like, where is your hometown? How do you grow up? Who's your family? What do you really like? When I bring up like this sense of I'm who, like I'm a Chinese, I'm sharing my proud. I just like is very ready to share my like life experience, my culture. But I just like feel like people sometimes just, oh, you're a Chinese, and bam, that is the end of the topic. They get the answer and they pass it. And I was like, no, I want to say more. But they're like, okay, you're a Chinese, I know.
Chinese is interesting also because it's a nationality, it's a culture, it's an ethnicity. Because I get asked that question all the time, are you Chinese? And I'm like, do you mean from China? Do you mean, do I speak it? Right? So there's this other complication, at least with that term itself.
Yeah,
that's true.
That is really a good question, because I should say those labels, those groups, like what Daisy said, she wants to talk about what is really her life, right? Chinese is being an important aspect of her life. And when she really wants to get into it, talk about it, people say, I know about you now. You're Chinese. Done. Right? I feel one disadvantage of having those labels is it makes people very lazy. Like, oh, I know Chinese, and I know you are Chinese, and in the future, when I have a question about Chinese food, I'm going to ask you. So I want to buy a ticket to China. Tell me where to buy it, right? That is a mental shortcut. You see, it has its utility, right? You know how to organize your information. You use that organize your information, and but there is a danger of it because our census classification. Do you know there is a coded microaggression, for lack of a better word? Asian people, say people who are classified racialized Asian, they hate the question, what type of Asian are you most? They hate the question, what type of Asian and where are you really from? They hate it. And at the same time, people want to say, I'm proud to be Chinese. That is very, very self-contradicting, right? One side, they feel they are not respected because people, just like Daisy said, I want to know where are you really from, end of it. And they feel they have been shut up. And then the other is that they want to feel they really belong. They want to have a sense of their holistic self. I guess it means including their ethnic identity. So they want to talk about it. I see this really complicated issue when I was navigating in this Asian world because I never thought it would be important. I just want to click a box to help the researcher so the data is complete. It just had no other meaning. And after I really talked to the Asian American, I mean the people who born here, grew up here, I found they assign the word both Asian and Chinese. There are way more meaning associated with that. So I cannot speak for them. For me, I feel being Chinese is a fact, and I like my heritage, and I hope my future child, I don't have them yet, but when I have it, I hope they can identify as half Chinese. And I want that happen. But how the kids and their peers feel about what it meaning of being Chinese, I'm clueless about that. I'm still trying to understand because it become personal for me after I know those people, their struggle. So I see those fight over the census box or data disaggregation. It's really way more than policy making. At the beginning, I thought it's simple. This is a bad policy because if you want to disaggregate, you need to do more, like figure out who is the immigrant, who is not, where they're from, they come as a refugee or other class of people. And that's how you make policy decision. And I think it's very easy to think, okay, because Chinese is broad, so we definitely don't want to group it from a huge category to another huge category. But people really, I mean the second generation Chinese immigrant, the children grow up here, they are super passionate about that box. And it must have some really good stuff for them. And later I worked with them a little bit together to try to get the Chinese American history into curriculum. And FAIR is doing a great job of doing that. And I feel maybe they feel there is a Chinese box. It means they are seeing themselves somewhere in the society. Just like Daisy feels, no, there are people really want to listening to her rather than just say, okay, I saw your face. I know who you are. Bye. That's my understanding.